Thank you for tuning in to Cop with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen. I'm with comics, Sam Johnston and Leslie Soto. Sam Johnston and Leslie Soto, how the hell are you?
Doing really good. How are you, Brian?
Good. Leslie, you there?
I am. Hello.
Thank you. We follow you everywhere. You were decently demonic, by the way, Leslie Soto. And I find that on your Instagram account, which is Color Me Leslie. And Sam Johnston is Beep Beep Richie, which I think is an it reference, but I'll spell it out because it's beep.beep.richie.t. Are you an it fan, Sam Johnston?
You caught me. You got me.
Yeah. The first one or the second one, or the first old one or the second one in two parts?
Oh,
I guess they both were. They both were in a couple parts. You like both?
No. Book.
Oh, the book.
Yeah, come on, Brian.
You like people running train on that poor girl. You like sexual scenes by Stephen King.
Every book, has its faults and parts that you just, skip through. It's a very large book, so that half to full page, I can just kind of skip over. But yeah, honestly, I'm a huge It and Stephen King fan, so that
Did you not like the movies then?
I unfortunately just had read the book before, and I can't separate my book brain from my movie brain sometimes, and I enjoy them for what they are. And it's funny because on our podcast, the Deadlights Pod, the movie that we're currently reviewing right now is the 1990 version of It.
Yes. Before we get too far along, I'm meaning to bring that up because it's so great you said so, because their Instagram account, their podcast is the Deadlights Podcast, and on Instagram it is the Deadlights Pod. And I got to get them on Twitter. I got to retweet all their funny shit. And it sounds like you guys are reviewing movies. Is that what you're doing? You're choosing a movie each episode?
Yes, correct. But it's more randomly. We have a popcorn kind of bucket system in which either us or if we have a guest that episode, they get to choose from. So that's what we watch. It's a little more sporadic that way, and we can go reviewing a movie from 1950 all the way to current time. So that's what's really fun about that.
And who's choosing from the bucket? You say a guest, or is it an audience?
A guest.
Wow.
Yeah.
So are your guests also comedians like you?
A lot of them are centered here in Chicago. There are all sorts of people. We've gotten some horror directors from here, Chicago.
Ooh.
Some artists themselves, and yeah, just like all kinds of people that we've met throughout our journey here in Chicago.
And looking at this Deadlights Pod thing, it's so great because some of the best movies, like I love Green Room, I love Sinister, I love Cabin in the Woods. Did you get anybody from those movies?
Unfortunately, not yet. That's what we're aiming for, is getting more people within the actual horror industry on the podcast, and getting their opinions on their own movies that they've made or worked on. Yeah. That would definitely be the ultimate goal for Leslie and I as far as the guests go. Typically, like Leslie said, it's a lot of people from different walks of life, and some people that love horror and some people that hate horror. So it's been kind of an interesting gambit of guests that we've had on so far.
Now, is it all horror?
It is. The podcast is all horror. Yep.
And I guess that's great because it's easier to get guests from horror, which is typically, can be successful at indie budgets. And so the chances of you guys getting some people from, and I don't know if they'll speak freely about their opinion of the movie, but they will definitely speak about their experience on the movie.
Something that I think that we've found so far, which I think is great about the horror community, is that it's a very close-knit community and people really enjoy talking about it and enjoy sharing their opinions and sharing their art within it. So the people and the artists and the filmmakers that we've had on so far have always been super excited to just sit down and watch a movie with us and talk about it. So we're really, I think, grateful to be within this community of horror fans, and that's really what we want to grow even more as the podcast goes on.
Yeah, and I think maybe I had Jonas Barnes on. He has I think it's a horror movie podcast. It's another goddamn horror podcast. I don't know if you're familiar, but through his Twitter account, he kind of sung the praises of, Terrifier, etc. So now that you've seen the success of Terrifier 2, what's your opinion of kind of that trajectory? I mean, like, it's pretty huge. It's at a mainstream theater. We enjoyed the heck out of it. What's your opinion on the movie and kind of how that made its way into the mainstream?
Have you seen that movie, Leslie?
No, I
Never
have.
seen Terrifier?
Oh my
So yeah, I
Lord.
saw I've seen Terrifier 1, but I've actually not seen Terrifier 2. And Terrifier 1 I can at least speak on in it definitely took me by surprise when I started watching it. It's absolutely, from the start, you can tell it's an indie film.
Yeah.
By the way it's shot, and it just kind of has that quality about it, not in a bad way at all. And then it just takes you on this horrifying, gory, bloody ride through, I think for the most part, just through a warehouse. These two girls just being just chased and terrified through this warehouse. And it is, I mean, I will say the practical effects, which is something that I hold very close to my heart when I'm watching horror films. I absolutely love the use of practical effects, from Cronenberg to John Carpenter to the newer stuff, that they're just getting so much better. And I think there's so much more of a love for the practical effects now, a resurgence, which I think is great for the genre.
Yeah.
And that movie, at least the first one, is definitely a testament to look at the love that these filmmakers have for the genre and for just making crazy, gory, fucked up scenes. And they did it. They very successfully made me cringe and made me close my eyes and look away. It's shocking, and I'm excited to see the second one.
Yeah, and I think it's more of the same, except that, you can tell the love, and like the love that, here, though, it manifested itself in, we're going to show you the practical effects, we're going to do it very close, but we're so proud of it, we're going to do it well lit. And I was like, I don't know, man, it's good, it's probably world class, they spent a lot of time on it, but you're like, this could have been a little bit better had it been slightly darker and slightly farther away. But like, what is the role, and bringing Leslie back in, and both of you can speak as, because I kind of put you on the spot with Terrifier too, but what's the role of horror? Is it to be kind of cringe with practical effects, or is it like jump scares? I think the first Paranormal Activity things, I think that's what they're called, Paranormal Activity. Yeah, the first ones were so effective to me because it's like they were doing it with limited periphery because they had a handheld camera, and so you never knew if something was going to jump out at you from the left or the right. And for me, jump scares were just so effective. What's kind of the, are all scares valid? What do you guys hold as the, I don't know, the model or the exemplar for a horror movies? Like, are all of them, if they're effective, are they welcome, or are some more respected in the horror community than others? And I mean, gore versus jump scares, etc.
Yeah, that is a question that we've definitely dealt with in our first season. Just like what movie can be called horror?
Because Green Room was kind of an example of that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I love Green Room. But I think it's anything that, like you said, has the aspects of jump scare and, a monster. Sam and I love talking about just like the classic monsters, such as a zombie, a werewolf, the Loch Ness Monster,
or all of them in Cabin in the Woods.
Exactly. Yes. And it's really fun that now people are really diving and kind of meshing things together, and we're having subgenres such as like the psychological films, which is the subgenre that I like to dive into.
So what's an example? What's the best example of that?
So the best example that I can think of right now is The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Okay.
I can never pronounce that director's name, but he's also the director of The Lobster. He's a Greek director, and I really like him, and his style is kind of bleak and very dull. And I like when a film makes me think. But I also, when it comes to horror, I like just kind of getting lost in the world and having it just kind of take me for the ride of just scaring me. And jump scares to me, I personally don't have an appeal to them. I think they're cheap. They are very I mean, they're effective. They will make you jump, and I hate that.
I hate it.
But when it can really stir something within me, that is when I find it to be absolutely just I can't stop thinking about that. And the platform is one of the best examples that I can think
the platform on Netflix.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, I love that. And so, like, are these kind of psychological things, like, I suppose Cabin in the Woods could qualify, to the extent it got real meta or whatever. But do you think, I guess, what is horror? And I guess, is this psychological horror? Is The Purge a horror movie? And is it psychological?
Well, this is a question that Leslie and I have, again, just been asking each other the entire podcast of, like, okay, what actually constitutes a horror film? And I think that because, yeah, Leslie talked about, the monsters, the vampires, the werewolves that we watch, and I think everyone would agree those are the classic ideas of a horror film. But then we bring up something like The Purge, which there's no monsters, there's no quote unquote supernatural thing that's going on. It's all human on human. But that sometimes that we have found is the most terrifying thing.
Like the platform, that's more human on human.
Like the platform, there's no really monster in it. It's more the monsters that are within ourselves.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah. Check out all this insight on the Deadlights pod. That's great.
Yeah, soundbite. That's I think really some of the more fun films. I mean, all the horror films that we watch, I think, are fun in some way, but the ones that we really can, like, dig our teeth into are the ones that aren't even necessarily a quote unquote monster. I think The Purge is a great example. The Platform is a great example. We watched this other movie in the first season called Audition, which is one of my all-time favorite horror movies now.
What are they auditioning for?
Well, this guy is looking for a new wife after losing his wife many years ago, and the one that he picks is not exactly who she presents herself as. And it is a very slow burn to a very insane climax. And I don't want to ruin anything because it's very good, but it's a Japanese film. And that's another thing that we found in this podcast is foreign films and foreign horror is incredible.
What was the recent huge hit? I mean, I saw Parasite, but after that,
Parasite
was Parasite the big one? It was the one with the monster. That was cool too. It was like it might have been in the Cloverfield universe. What was that one?
The Host was another one.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, same director as Parasite, which we actually did watch in the first season of the podcast as well. And that specifically, when we're talking about, monster movies versus, human, the monster within human movies, that's almost a mixture of both, because yes, there's a monster that's running around terrifying soul, but also the monster was created by man messing with the environment and dumping chemicals in there. So a monster that was almost brought on by ourselves.
Oh, that's cool. So does Parasite have a monster?
It's a human mind,
The mind, yeah. That one's more
mindset.
Yeah.
Wait, no. So Parasite did not have a monster other than the human within.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what was the other one? Okay, like I really loved Hereditary. Was so good at the beginning. Like I watched it until her head got cut off. You guys hear? And then I was like, this movie is perfect. I have to go to bed. I'm turning it off. Like that is the perfect thing. And I don't know if it got, I don't know if it got better or worse. But I just had to say that. Like,
wow.
Wait, say that again.
You didn't finish it? Wow.
Well, yeah, it was late. It was super late at night. I was so hooked though. I was like, I got through the head coming off. I was like, anything lesser, I would not have even seen that much. But then you contrast it with something like Babadook, and I think I saw the whole thing, and I was like, I don't even understand what was supposed to be scary about this. Did either of you see Babadook?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
What's supposed to be scary about it? I forgot. Like I was like, I don't remember anything being scary about this.
I believe what was just really scary about that, I mean, she is like just depressed.
That's kind of what it was, right? That was the only thing about it.
Just the depression and just like not being able to be there fully for her child. And her child is being also traumatized by this monster demon. What is he?
Is there a demon?
Oh yeah, the Babadook.
I don't. Yeah. So I mean, I must have missed that. I must have blinked and missed it. But it, it's so much hype, and so I was thinking there was something other than depression. And you're saying now that there was a demon, though.
Yeah.
Somebody edited the horror out of my movie because I don't remember that at all. And then there was the shittiest movie that had a good review, and it was like As Below, So Above. It had the guy from Superstore in it who looks like Chachi, that guy. And I was like, everything was like, I think you had cave creatures like in Descent, but like they just kind of like were in the periphery. You're like, you thought jump scares were coming and they never came. Like horror kind of was indicated that it was going to come around every corner and never did. And so, did either of you see that? And do you just remember it being awful or no?
I did see that, but I honestly cannot remember a single thing about it, which I think is probably of how good it was. But I think that it's kind of interesting when you see like horror can be very divisive in that way, and also to put a label on a movie as a horror movie, automatically you're bringing in a certain audience. So unfortunately, I think sometimes with the horror genre, you get just these movies that they pump out just make a horror movie to make a horror movie to get that money. There's money grabs in it and all that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, I think sometimes the genre can be saturated with these projects that are only servicing the wallets and not actually pieces of art like Hereditary or Babadook, which those are both very well-made pieces of film beyond horror. Those are good pieces of art. Okay. So unfortunately, you got things like that movie or whatever the case is that I think some people glob onto and are like, that's what horror is. And no, not necessarily. There's good and bad in everything. So
yeah, so I guess it's a cash grab. And so I guess that's my question. Like, because its budgets can be smaller, that means that the Deadlights Pod could make a horror film. And if you guys choose to do so, what would be the horror film that you would make? Kind of what choices would you make? Would it be psychological? Is there a monster that nobody's thought of yet? Totally putting you on the spot.
Leslie, how would you kill me?
Well, as much as I hate those very violent movie towards women, that's the only kind of like movie that I can think about making. Because to me that is what's the most like, that's just the scariest thing for me, just getting followed. And just making an absolute movie like POV and just a stalking kind of movie.
And so I asked, how could Sam add to that then? What would you add to that, Sam?
Interesting. That's pretty good.
Like, could you I mean, because it would have to be a joint effort. So I mean, it has to be a stalker film involving women being stalked. And so who would you make this, what would you add to kind of make it a Deadlights Pod movie rather than Leslie Soto movie?
Well, I think, something that Leslie and I both like in these movies that we watch are, of course, the twists and turns that you go through. So maybe this person that we're in the POV the whole time we think is going to be the victim, but instead they turn out to be the killer.
Yes. Now, Leslie, would that be acceptable to you?
Because absolutely.
It's kind of flipping it. Women are subjected to violence at a pretty high rate. But if that person turns out to be the killer, would you have to make that killing justified, or maybe it was she killed out of fear rather than valid concern?
Yeah, I mean, what that made me think of is that perhaps the person that she's trying to kill is someone that is living in her house, and she just found them after coming from vacation and she can't get in or whatever. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Like,
there's things like invasion
I'm just
films and
squatting.
reverse invasion, and like I think there was a reverse invasion movie where he had a girl downstairs chained up to the wall. That was cool. It was like a blind guy who was protecting his house, but it's like he was protecting it for a valid reason because he was kidnapping and torturing a woman in the basement. I forgot that was called. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, what's
That
that
was
called?
great.
Don't breathe.
Yeah, something like that. It was fucking amazing.
yeah.
Pretty wild. That was a good one.
And so, like, what makes it, if your guest is choosing out of the popcorn bucket, is the guest also populating the popcorn bucket before choosing, or are you guys? And how many kind of movie names are in the popcorn bucket, etc.?
Oh boy. At this point, there's probably upwards of like 300 films in there. And
So every time you see a good one, you just kind of add it.
Oh yeah.
that, or like we get suggested by other people. It's been a compilation of just of lists of movies that me and Leslie have been making over years. So and yeah, it's a combination of both movies that we have seen and have not seen. So we try to keep it, and that's why we like the randomness. I don't like the idea of us handpicking the movies because there's going to be some sort of bias.
Yeah, and is it unfair? Because as your guests have, so like if you've seen it before, you're going to be able to speak about it in depth, whereas your guest might not.
Sure.
Exactly. And I like when either we all have seen the movie and then our second watch or our third watch, we get a different perspective, or if we haven't seen the movie at all, and we're all experiencing this moment together. And that's what I like about going to see a horror movie at the movie theaters, is the camaraderie, is all the gasps, all the yells, all the jumping together. So experiencing that with our guests is really cool, and having them talk about what they liked or didn't like about it.
I mean, is it reaction video where you're actually watching this in real time and then you guys just splice it together?
No, we don't film ourselves watching the movie.
Okay. I was like, that would be cool.
Yeah, that honestly, thank God, that would be way too much for me to edit.
Yes, the editing burning. Yeah, how long are the episodes as they are?
Typically through the first season, they're around an hour. We're trying to get it a little shorter than that, but yeah, typically it's about an hour listen of us talking about the movie, talking about our favorite scenes and our reaction and what we think the movie's actually talking about and how successfully they did all those things. And then in the end, we give it our own rating, which we call the Smash Pumpkin rating out of 5 Smash Pumpkins. How good of a horror movie we think it is.
Wow. And did you choose Smash Pumpkins just because that's what people do during Halloween, or is an homage to Smashing Pumpkins, the Chicago band?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Because today is the greatest. But actually it did start in October. So that is where the idea came from.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, are you finding that the hit count is bigger during the Halloween season?
When it was October, like, it was funny, like in that second half of like September and then October and then even through November, there is definitely an upkick of subscribers and listens and watches, and people are definitely seeking out spooky stuff during the spooky season. But we like to bring the spooky season year round. There is no spooky season for us.
Like, is there a difference? I think that, I have a super horror friend who's a friend of mine, and I think I recently read an article about it too, where certain types of people like horror. They're kind of adventurous and they want that adrenaline hit or something like that. Have you noticed that a certain type of, you're getting a certain type of audience member for your pod? Like, is it thrill seekers? Because it's like, I really, I'm kind of very, very calm and things like that. But, and this person's very hyped up. And so I don't know why this person would want more, jump scares in his life. This guy's gonna have a heart attack. Whereas I really need it, but I don't love it so much where I have to do it all the time. Like, kind of, that goes into what, did you guys choose horror because you guys are both like adrenaline junkies or something?
Yeah. I would say probably I am. I watch horror films. I would watch them on my own because I didn't have anybody else to watch them with. Hence the reason
I have to start a pod. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's how Sam and I got together and just decided to make this into a thing. But my podcasts are all full of just true crime. I'm listening to true crime all the time. I'm watching documentaries about serial killers or like,
Yes.
you know, Munchausen disorder or whatever that's called.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I don't know. It's the only genre that I can fully invest myself in. Although I love comedy and I love watching and supporting my friends that do comedy here in Chicago, it's just really hard for me to sit down and watch a movie that I'm supposed to laugh at.
Yeah, I have
I
a
don't
problem
know.
with that too. Yeah,
Yeah, I
because
guess
they're
I'm
usually
more
pretty bad. They're not very subtle.
exactly.
They're not very subtle. And so if you're a comedian with true, kind of good taste, it's not nuanced enough to laugh at. It's just so broad that it hits you over the head and it's not funny.
Exactly. And it's just like, I don't know, it's more stylized in a way that it's very forced for me. And like I said, I like to think while I'm watching something.
Yeah.
Otherwise I truly do fall asleep. Like I would get bored and I will fall asleep.
This is true. And it has happened on the podcast before.
And so I guess that brings up the whole comedy angle. And what did you find yourself in the comedy community? Were you guys talking about horror on stage, and are you talking about horror on stage now? And if not, what is making its way into your act?
Well, it's funny because I feel like a lot of times comedy and horror can kind of coexist, and you hear a lot of horror comedy movies. I mean, we've already talked about Cabin in the Woods. I would absolutely say that there's a good amount of comedy within that film.
Yes, if it's got Bradley Whitford in it,
absolutely,
it's gonna be funny. I love that guy.
And so because I think in the end they're trying to do similar things. In a horror movie, someone's trying to terrify you and make you scared and make you jump, which is very hard to do.
Yeah.
In comedy, someone's trying to make you laugh and fall out of your seat, which is also extremely, extremely hard to do. There are these two extremes that artists are trying to push you to. So while on the surface they feel like they could be the complete opposite ends of the spectrum, I think they're actually a lot closer than people think.
Yeah, and I think some of it's like it's hard to make somebody react against their will if you're not kind of bringing them into your world. And so if they're so distracted, they're not listening to the joke or watching the horror movie, like it's not going to work. And so it's almost like you have to make sure that you bring the audience into your world, whether or not you're a horror film or a stand-up comedian.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just for me personally, I found myself in a group of people that loved making comedy and loved producing sketches. We're all filmmakers and we love making film in general. That's where the love started. And then adding on the fact of we love laughing, that's kind of was just the natural route for us to go, which was comedy videos and comedy sketches. But I always had that little need and that little want for horror in my life. So I made it myself. And I think, meeting Leslie and forming this podcast has been an awesome outlet to explore the love of that.
And how did you find out that Leslie was a horror fiend? Or did she find you? Because it sounds like she's like, I just want somebody to watch horror movies with. How did you find Sam?
We worked together at a restaurant here. And it was like the first year that we had met, and he was talking about doing a 31 day of horror for October. And that year he did it on his own, did all the reviews on his page. And then next year came and he was like, I'm going to do the same thing. I had a lot of fun. And I was like, well, why don't you record it? And he's like, why don't you join me? And then we kind of just like invited a bunch of other people that we worked with. And it was truly chaotic, amazing.
Really?
Yeah, it was so much fun.
Because you're finding your sea legs or whatever, like you were trying to figure out, what to review and what to talk up, what's worth talking about in an hour-long pod.
He had already made the list. I believe Sam, did you make it like the year before?
I over the year had like put it together and as the year went on, with the 31 days, I always like to do like a range from like 1950s all the way to like modern films. So over the year, I like to put together, that's definitely a curated list of films. But yeah, it was just it was honestly that first year that we did it together, we were watching every film every day and then recording the podcast right after we watched it, which was another, sometimes 2 to 3 hour conversation. And then I would go and edit each film, and then we would have to try to get it out by the next day. So it was insane. It was tiring, barely got any sleep for both of us that month. But yeah, it really did give us a great introduction to watching horror films, getting those tropes, understanding who these filmmakers are, and understanding the greats and all the important, I guess, pillars of horror, and also gave us a great sense of how we work off of each other as hosts. And I think that after we did that 31 days, we were like, why don't we just continue doing this? Why don't we just, instead of doing it every single day, let's do it once a week and just release it as a weekly podcast, because we had so much fun doing it and there's less pressure once a week rather than every single day. So now I think we've gotten to a point where we can really break down these films pretty well, and know what we're looking for when we're going into it, and just, work off of each other very well too.
Good. And that's what we can expect from the Deadlights pod. When's the next one coming out? And do we find out the movie ahead of time, or do we need to tune in? We can tune in everywhere, right? This is YouTube, this is Spotify, etc.
Yeah, so YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well. So we just started production on our season 2. Season 1 is completely available on all those platforms that I just talked about. So we have about 36 episodes in our first season. Season 2 is in production, and you can probably expect it to be coming out at the end of January in 2023.
Yes, dude, I can't believe it's going to be 2023. And we follow them everywhere at Sam. Sam Johnston is at beep.beep.richie.t, and that's on Instagram. Leslie Soto is at Color Me Leslie. And also the Deadlights pod is the Deadlights podcast can be found on Instagram at the Deadlights pod. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Leslie Soto also has a 14-year-old Doberman Husky called Ozzy, and Ozzy has an Instagram account. This is gorgeous, and it's Ozzy the Buddy. What's Ozzy doing right now, Leslie?
He is currently cuddled up right next to me, sleeping. Oh, he just woke up because I
keep saying his name.
Yeah, but he's partially deaf, so I think he's looking in the wrong direction.
That is so Ozzy. So we're gonna follow you everywhere. We're gonna wait for the January 2023 next episode, but in the meantime, we're gonna watch 36 episodes that are available everywhere. The Deadlights podcast, Sam Johnston, Leslie Soto. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having us, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.